right, folks, we got a great episode of the BoomBastiCAST for you today. We have Carl Gottlieb, the one and only, the legend, writer of films like Jaws. You might have heard of that film before. You like comedic films. Maybe you heard of a movie called The Jerk with Steve Martin. Maybe you've seen a movie with Ringo Starr called Caveman. You know what I mean? Beside myself.
Maybe you're feeling sick. Maybe you feel like you need
gotta
a doctor.
see the good doctor.
You need to see the doctor. The Dr. Detroit.
Dr. Detroit. Colin out the Dr. Detroit. One of my favorite comedies of all time. The Dan Aykroyd vehicle, Dr. Detroit. I love it so much. I'm rocking the T-shirt for the occasion. The gentleman is, he was in MASH. Variety comedy shows with the greats, you know what I mean? The legends, rest in peace. George Burns, the cigar tipping legend himself. We finally got ourselves a story of George Burns. We've been reaching for one of them for a while on the cast, and we finally have a George Burns story. And now we owe that to one man. And what man is that?
Carl Gottlieb.
Well, let's invite him to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, welcoming to the BoomBastiCAST for the first time, the great Carl Gottlieb.
Hey, how you doing?
Carl, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. And yourselves?
Not too bad, not too bad. Now, I believe it all started roughly around with the committee. Was that one of the first kind of jumps into entertainment? Yeah, we had the great Larry Hankin on the show, and
that guy.
Yeah, great dude, and he was also a part of the committee. Yeah, the committee's a cool comedy troupe. You know what I mean? It's like Second City, but a little more political, if I remember correctly. A very cool deal. Now, how did that, kind of how did you get involved with the committee?
Well, Larry got hired. I was in the Army in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Larry had been we were roommates in Greenwich Village before I got drafted. Then I got drafted, and I'm in the Army in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, minding my own business, reading the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, because we're just 100 miles down the road from St. Louis. And I see that a show called Compass Theater is opening in Gaslight Square in St. Louis. And one of the actors featured in the show is my old roommate, Larry Hankin. So I go to St. Louis and I meet up with Larry, and I take every opportunity I can to go to the city and pretend I'm not in the Army and just hang out backstage at the theater and give suggestions and just participate. And in any case, the show closes and Larry goes up to Second City and gets hired by Alan Myerson to be in the committee in San Francisco. And he writes me about how well it's going. And then I get out of the Army. I'm still committed to my time in the service. But when I get out, I go to San Francisco, and the committee needs a stage manager, so they offered me a job as stage manager, and that's what I did in those days. I was a techie. So I took the job. And I roomed with Hankin and continued our relationship from college. I mean, we go back to 1957.
Yeah.
And it all went well. I went to New York and came back as an actor, and I was an actor in the show. One of my best friends in the show, Howard Hessman, just died recently. It was very unfortunate. But that's happening more and more these days as people age out and disappear. Anyway, that's how I got into the committee, through Hankin.
That's cool. Yeah, and that kind of you guys would you say you kind of like rooted up from there and kind of polished up your stuff, and then. I know the variety shows were big with Larry as well. And you did some Smothers Brothers yourself and stuff.
Yeah, no, what happened was, like I say, I went to the committee as a stage manager, and then I became an actor in the show in '66. And then in '68, the show came to Los Angeles with me in it. Larry Staten was out of the show by this time. He was in San Francisco, living in his car, and um, I so I went to L.A. to open the show in L.A. and we were very successful. I mean, we got rave reviews from the mainstream press, which in those days was the LA Times and the Herald Examiner, the trade press, which was Daily Variety, Weekly Variety, and the Hollywood Reporter, and the LA Free Press and the Avatar, which were the two underground papers, the alternative press. So we were hit, with everybody, and people came and saw the show, and started the casting directors started seeing us and hiring us. Chris Ross went into a movie called Viva Max with Jerry Paris directing. I was hired to be in the movie of MASH with Robert Altman. And then the Smothers Brothers hired me to be a writer, first on the Glenn Campbell show, which is where I met Steve Martin and Bob Einstein, Rob Reiner, and all my LA showbiz friends. And, we just, went from one show to another. And managed to. I was lucky. I got involved in some exciting shows, including, of course, the Fish movie.
I always consider those comedy tropes to be like punk rock. You know what I mean? Like a real underground punk rock, raucous, type of group. Like a lot of fun.
Well, I see them. I see it a little bit differently. I see them
Yeah.
more like the group theater and the method acting days of the 40s and the 50s. And what the Stanislavski method was to actors of a previous generation, improvisation was to the actors of my generation. Now, I'm old now, but in the 70s, first of all, there weren't that many improvisational theaters. We all knew each other. If you were in the committee or the premise or Second City or Compass Players, that was all the improvisers there were. And then the Groundlings started up. That was a former committee stage manager began the Groundlings, Gary Austin. So the principles of improvisation became the new principles for informed acting styles going forward from 1970. And I think that's true right up until today. I mean, you've got all kinds of stars you scratch a modern comedy star, whether it's Amy Poehler or Tina Fey or Bill Murray. They were all improvisers first.
Yeah.
They all bring that sensibility to their work.
Yeah.
So if you understand improvisation, you understand modern acting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was being in MASH, and one of the great things about that film, I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites, is the fact that the film was heavily improvised from what I've read and heard about. And now, I'm assuming they had a script and they just let you guys jump off of that, or did they just sometimes just had you guys just improvise with a loose idea of what you guys were doing, or?
No. In all cases, we started with a script. I mean, very few people make up a movie. John Cassavetes used to do that with kind of disastrous effect. I mean, his improvisation is not what John Cassavetes did, although he did make it up as he went along. I think Cassavetes was kind of old school and didn't understand the new style of improvisation, whereas Bill Murray obviously did. Feature films were not improvised. Everybody worked off the script, including Altman and MASH. But he would encourage you to ad lib. He wouldn't discourage. Some directors and will tell their script supervisors, watch the book, tell me if they go off book, and then they will cut. No, do it. Do it the way it's in the script. And other directors just let the actors go and record it. And as technique advanced and we had digital recording where you didn't have a physical piece of tape, you had to constantly rewind if you wanted to do something again, or take two. You have to look for big pieces of tape and film, all that. You could essentially improvise as long as you had as long as you had a chip in the camera recording what was going on, you could improvise.
Yeah.
And Altman encouraged us to do that. And then he developed a camera style, which is the kind of distinctively Altman's. You can kind of recognize his films, his visual style. He would begin the day by putting on a telephoto lens, a zoom, and then he'd start shooting, and he'd always keep the camera about, instead of pushing in for a close-up, he would zoom in subtly for a close-up. And the camera was generally like 6 or 8 feet away from the actors. So as an actor, you couldn't tell if Altman was favoring you with a close-up or if he was wide on the entire ensemble. So what that forced you to do, if you were a conscientious actor, is pay attention to the character and concentrate and, talk to the other actor on the set and just, it made you do your job, which was great.
Yeah.
And he would record it all. And it led to, really interesting work. I don't think Viva Max was improvised because Jerry Paris didn't understand modern directing. Jerry Paris was old school also.
Yeah.
It's very funny. You can see Jerry Paris is in The Wild One with Marlon Brando.
Yeah, yeah.
He's one of the biker gang, if you can imagine.
I like that. Yeah, Robert Altman's a fantastic director, and he's like a great for ensemble cast with a bunch of people. I believe Nashville had like 20-something main characters or something like that.
Yeah. And you can follow all their stories. I mean, Altman's terrific that way. It was funny, Ring Lardner Jr. wanted to take he was a credited screenwriter on MASH. And when he saw the dailies and he saw how the film was being cut, he wanted to take his name off it. And even Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland were, kind of unhappy with the style. They were not comfortable with it. And they wanted to replace Altman but then as people started watching it, and then of course when the movie was nominated for Academy Award for screenplay, boom, Ring Lardner said, "Oh yeah, I wrote that." But I didn't write a word of it.
Yeah.
That's usually how it goes. I mean, especially when you're doing something that is not the standard, not what everyone else is doing. You're always going to have naysayers. You always have people like, "Well, you're not supposed to do that." And a lot of people don't see how it works until, the finished product is put together.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I love about Altman films is the fact that, everything, it when you watch his films, it feels less of a movie and more of like watching real life because it just feels so natural.
Film is, for the most part, or a subset of film, is that it's realistic. If you're watching it in a movie, you expect it to look like real life. You don't want to see stagey acting. You don't want to see British acting. You want to see it as natural as possible.
Yeah.
And through close-up and good film and editing technique, films look that way, and unless they're extremely stylistic, like Adavar, or horror films, which have their own aesthetic going back 50 years. But for realistic stories, realistically told, you can't beat modern improvisation-based acting.
Yeah. I think it was Altman where even with his audio, like he was one of the first people to intertwine different dialogues over each other.
Overlapping dialogue. It was very frustrating on MASH and the next couple of films. They hadn't developed multi-track recording yet. Everything was recorded on a 4-track.
Yeah.
So if you went to dailies, Altman had a mixer on his lap, and was as the film unfolded, the soundtrack was very, very difficult to listen to because Altman was, playing with the dials, looking for the channel that had the actor who was speaking. It was like, 8 or 10 actors being recorded. He had to find the audio track that had the actor whose close-up it was. It was very frustrating. And on top of that, Altman would smoke a giant joint before dailies. We'd come in from the set and he'd have a scotch and a joint, and then he'd be ready to work.
Yeah.
No, that sounds like a fun atmosphere. It would be great going to work to have a joint in and a scotch at the same time.
Well, for me, because I was interested in learning everything there was to know. It was great because I saw the raw technique and the mechanics, and I was always interested in the technical aspect of things. So I was soaking it all up and making notes for what I would do if I were a director. And then I became a director. Lucked out.
So you worked with some great directors, you're soaking it up. There's no better way, I think, to learn, than to be on set with these people.
Yep.
We got Steven Spielberg, of course. It's funny. I tell people, because me and Alex make movies over here, and I tell people, I said, a director is legendary when people hear that you're trying to make movies and they call you them. You know what I mean? Like, okay, Spielberg, yeah, go make your movie. You know what I mean? But that's how legendary he is.
Oh yeah.
Now you go way back with Steven, I believe, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm in 2 of his movies that he made before Duel.
Yeah, Something Evil.
Something Evil and
I want to check. Yeah. I want to check out Something Evil. I haven't seen it, but it's like The Exorcist before The Exorcist, right?
Exactly right. It was The Exorcist before The Exorcist. Same theme.
Yeah, you got to give that prop. It's funny because you say bring up Duel, and like a lot of people go, they automatically think of those bigger films, of course. You know what I mean? They kind of forget that he had the humble beginnings, if you will.
Also, he directed the first episode of Columbo.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Doesn't he reclaim some type of ownership? I heard if you direct the pilot episode of a TV show, you're like forever involved with it. Is that true?
I have no idea what his contract was.
No, I think that there was one of those.
He had no leverage as a deal maker in those days, but he was mentored by Sid Sheinberg, who was head of at that time. Sid was head of television production, and he mentored Steven. He's the one who gave him his first contract at Universal as a director and let him direct Night Gallery and Columbo and his early directing efforts.
It was cool to hear about kind of the upcomings of Spielberg as well, because like I said, it don't get no bigger. You know what I mean? It is what it is.
I know, absolutely. Well, it was amusing that my wife and I in those days had a house that was like right in Hollywood, like midway between Laurel Canyon and Wally Heider's studio in the Hollywood Bowl. So everybody who lived in the canyon and worked in Hollywood, which in those days was everybody who counted, Jackson Browne, David Crosby, Joni Mitchell, the whole David Geffen stable, all those people were frequent guests at the house. They would, stop by on the way to work, smoke a joint, hang out, you could be sure that somebody else you knew would drop by. So it was, a great big, kind of extended family. And it was a great way to stay in touch, and it kept everybody on their toes, and there was a sense of community in those days. It's missing now, but in those days there was community.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and it's very artistic atmosphere. You know what I mean?
Well, it's nourishing. I mean, there's a lot of people around you doing the same thing. And because there was a sense of community, you would pass along opportunities. It's kind of unheard of these days for actors to share casting notes with other actors because, the parts are too hard to get.
Yeah.
In those days, if I'd be auditioning for something, I usually found myself at auditions with the same actors, the same physical body type. With me, it was Oliver Clark and Michael. What was his name? Michael Lerner. We always showed up at the same. So In those days, if you were up for something and you were in casual conversation with one of your peers, you would say, have you been up for this part? Have you been up for MASH yet? And the guy said, no, I don't even know anything about it. I said, well, call your agent. They're casting and they're looking for a guy like you. I mean, they saw me, but they'll see you too. I mean, you would tell people about
Yeah.
casting opportunities, which nowadays is unheard of.
It's
Yeah.
my counterpart over here is an actor, and it's a wild world because yeah, even if you're not the body type or anything, it's like they don't want you to get the joy of getting the role. Is like it's not just the role, it's like the joy of getting something that they don't want to like dish out and share, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
And the thing
mean,
that we have to remember as actors and artists is they can't do it without us.
It's true.
They got to have us, and they keep us controlled by making it appear difficult and making it arbitrary and by making stupid decisions. Uh, and then we just have to persevere and to try to overcome those odds. So we do.
yeah. I mean, it's and going back with what you're saying about the sense of community. I mean, Matt and myself have tried to build kind of a community where we are in Boston, but we find, I mean, even at our level, and we're not even up to the level of the bigger films in Hollywood or anything, but a lot of people unfortunately have this mentality that if I'm not going to get this role, you're not going to get this role, so I'm not going to help you get the
Yeah.
role.
Well,
And
that's just stupid.
yeah,
I mean that's where selfishness and self-interest get in the way of the work,
Yeah.
because acting is and movies are intensely collaborative. No, the only person who makes a movie entirely by him or herself is an animator who draws every frame and records all the voices. That's the only person who's actually a solo filmmaker. Everybody else depends on collaborators.
yeah. And
Why
the
do you
thing
think
is that it's
yeah,
such a collaborative piece of, I mean, as different ways of being creative, different art forms, and all that. Making film is, like you said, extremely. You have to collaborate. I mean, if you have people fighting each other, then that the film's not going to come out. It's not going to look good, and you
Well,
have to work together.
it's interesting. Uh, I had a script supervisor on one of my movies who used to mutter, if we were having a good time, she'd say, a happy set is a crappy set. Uh, but
I don't agree with that. I
you
think
don't work with
I
Omen?
don't,
Yeah,
I look forward to, enthusiasm from everybody involved is, I think, a better way to work.
for sure. Everybody's kind of having fun, but not out of control fun, but
Yep.
enjoying their time there. And
Yep.
they gotta be a part of the collaborative process is big too. If you're putting in input and it's being used, you value that project a lot more because it's more your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder why the acting community has gotten that way. You know what I mean? Is
Well,
it
the
because
world has gotten away. I mean, COVID has changed everything, but the way the world was heading, even pre-COVID,
yeah,
was more and more toward um, self-interest above all.
yeah,
And despite what Adam Smith, the economist, says about uh, individual, individual greed conspires to make for a healthy market. Um, I don't think so. I think if we lose the spirit of cooperation, a lot goes out of the process. And I don't know when it changed, but it just I guess people got more selfish.
it's a celebrity has become such a big thing. I mean, you go to the grocery
Yeah,
store
we're in
yeah,
an era where people. McLuhan described them. He said, people are well known for being well known,
Yeah.
not well known for any particular talent. I mean, the Kardashians are a
right,
perfect example.
yeah,
They parlayed, big asses and good complexions into a multi-million-dollar enterprise.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then, you got
So,
kids.
and when the normal person sees that,
Mhm.
they say to themselves, and I can't blame them. They say, "Well, this person's got no fucking talent, and they're rich and famous. So I can be rich and famous whether I've got talent or not." Well, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, that's
Fame
very
and
interesting.
fortune are still imponderable and can't be created. You can buy it up to an extent, but eventually, when your advertising money runs out, if you don't have a product, you don't have a product. All the advertising in the world won't convince an audience to see something if the word of mouth is bad.
It's true. It's like who we choose for heroes isn't quite up the caliber. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's unfortunate, but I
Well,
agree with you.
I posted on Facebook a true expression of how I feel now. It's because I was, just dismayed by the number of people I didn't recognize who were obviously stars because everybody else was interested in them.
Mm,
And then I realized, well, you know what? Media today, right now, 2022, is dominated by actors and players who I don't like producing material that I hate.
yeah,
So it was so I recognize a couple of the women all stars, Adele, Lady Gaga, Madonna, Beyonce, Rihanna, those people. But beyond them, there's nobody I'm interested in. Certainly no male actors.
yeah.
Uh, and there's some male actors whose fucking success baffles me entirely. That, for example, Pete Davidson, who I think is just a fucking joke,
He
but
is.
people love him, so good for him.
Yeah, he's got
Another
that Kardashian thing. Yeah,
another illustration of the power of Saturday Night Live.
there you go. Yeah, him. He's tagged right in with the Kardashian clan. It's funny because he was just SNL, a dude on SNL that nobody really knew. And I think he controversy, and then he dated a Kardashian. Now he's like the biggest deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's still ugly and has no talent.
He looks like Beetlejuice, the Beetlejuice cartoon. He looks like Beetlejuice from the Beetlejuice cartoon.
Hey, don't insult Beetlejuice. He looks better.
I
Yeah.
know I shouldn't hate on Beetlejuice. Yeah, it's weird. It's scary and sad where they like put these heroes at. You know what I mean? It's because like you said, dude, it makes
By the way, Pete Davidson, if you're watching, I don't really hate you.
we got your back. Kanye West really hates you, Pete Davidson. We like you. It's okay. No worries.
But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing because we were talking to someone else on the show, and he made a comment which is so true that I think it was only maybe 10 or 20 years ago. They asked a bunch of young people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And back in the old days, I want to be like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be, you know, the president. But now you talk to most of these young people, all they say is, I want to be rich and famous. Not that they want to excel in any specific career or want to do or give back, but everyone just wants to be rich and famous. And
They want their
unfortunately,
15 seconds in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Warhol's got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, it's true.
yeah. But
Well,
yeah,
the interesting thing about that is if everybody does get their 15 minutes of fame in the future or in the present, yes, we will have to endure them, but only for 15 minutes.
That's true.
true. We
Then
can
what's
we can
next?
fast forward through the 15 minutes of their fame and then get on with our lives.
What would people want? It's like the Willy Wonka. Like if they got what they always wanted, life would be meaningless for everybody. It'd be more depression going around or something.
I guess. I mean, it wouldn't be so bad if everybody got what they wanted, but be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
You gotta
and
get
and the truth is, a lot of people. I mean, I think the fact is that a lot of people don't really know what they want. I mean, they think they know what they want, and when they get it, they realize that what they want, what they were hoping would fulfill their emptiness or what they think they needed, they find out that it doesn't fill that, and then they find themselves more depressed than before.
Yeah, too bad.
Yeah.
That's
Priorities thing.
by being stupid and not having your priorities in order.
Yeah, it's definitely a priorities thing. It goes right back to that, and showcasing what they making people think what they want when if they then it doesn't have to be so bombastic. You find happiness within.
I don't know if Hankin told you this story about I think it was his father. When the committee played Broadway, his family came in from Long Island, obviously, to see the show. Their son was on Broadway. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And after they went out to eat after the show, and his father said, "So, so now what?" And Larry said, "Well, we're then we're going to go to San Francisco and back, maybe make movies." And then his father said, "And then what?" He said, "Well, then I'll get more jobs as an actor. I'll be better paid." And his father said, "And then what?" If you just keep asking yourself, "And then what?" uh, eventually you either come to what you really want, or you come to the realization that you're in a dead end where the only payoff is 15 minutes of fame and fortune, and if you don't bank all your money from that period, you know you don't. Chances are you won't get a second try. Some people get second and third chances. I think Fitzgerald said there are no second acts in life, but there are a lot of second acts.
Yeah.
A lot of people reinvent themselves. But then, eventually you hit your 40s and your 50s and you realize, okay, wherever I am now is where I'm going to be. It's not like when you're 20s when you can, you know, move to another city, change your name, grow a beard, shave a beard, you know, the possibilities are endless. You can try two or three different professions. You can fail. There's no, there's no terrible penalty for failing. You fail, so what? You move on. But then around 40 or 50, you don't move on. I mean, you're kind of in a groove, and it's not so easy.
Yeah.
So you'd better be happy at that point in your life, because otherwise it's going to be another unpleasant 40 years until you leave.
Uh-oh, man, I think I'm in trouble. I'm 40.
You'll be all right.
I'm still trying to grab that brass ring. I don't know.
Well, the thing about acting, well, the thing about the arts in general, is that the brass ring can come at any time.
Yeah.
You can be, a character actor like Larry of 70, 70 some years, some whatever age he is, and if something he's in catches the public eye, all of a sudden he'll be a star again.
Yeah.
And it's fame is fickle that way.
Yeah.
You can't plan for it. We don't tell them what's a hit; they tell us.
That's true.
Yeah.
Shit. So there's still hope for you, Huck, man.
I'm hoping because I mean, I got the bug, and it's not going to ever leave me alone. So I'm going to either make it or die trying. So.
Well, on the bright side, uh, character actors don't age out the way leading men do. And with all respect, you're not a leading man type, from what I can see.
Oh, come on. I was thinking I was going to be like the next Brad Pitt. I mean, I was
The next
planning on
Tom
taking it.
Cruise, the next Bradley Cooper, the next
I like it.
the next Brad Pitt. No, you're lucky you'll be uh, you, an actor who transitions like John Voight or Dustin Hoffman.
I can definitely go for that.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I the characters I play are always quirky character types, and I've always loved character actors over the leading men because they're always the most interesting characters to watch on TV on
Well,
film.
somebody I know who babysat for John Voight's kids He was Angelina Jolie's babysitter when she
Yeah.
was 8. But he told Voight, he said, you're making the right. Voight was agonizing over playing a villain in something, and my friend said to him, "Hey, cheer up! If you start getting villain parts, your career is limitless. You can play villains forever."
Yeah.
It's true.
For example, Christopher Plummer or Vincent Price, or Harry Dean Stanton, who had a fabulous career without ever being a leading man. So, character actors do okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's truth. The so you did a lot of television writing. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yep.
A lot of comedy stuff. Flip Wilson. I love some Flip Wilson. You know what I mean? Some Sammy
Yep.
Davis.
Yep.
George Burns.
Yep.
A little bit of George Burns. Yeah. You got any cool stories about George? Because I love George.
Well, George was fabulous. He was. It's very interesting. My mother-in-law was in vaudeville, and she lived to be 100, 101.
Right.
So she had memories going back to 1921, 1922, when she went into show business. And she would say, "Oh, George Burns, he's not as old as he says he is." Because she was, pushing. She was in her 90s at this point.
Yeah.
She says everybody knows, and by everybody she meant everybody in vaudeville. Most of them were dead, but everybody in vaudeville. They said when he went on stage in the Pee Wee Quartet, there were child labor laws, and you could not tour if you were under 12, I think. A lot of states you could not play. So when George Burns joined the Pee Wee Quartet, which was his first job, he changed his age from 10 to 12 or something like that. So if he was George Burns was telling everybody he was like 99, he was actually 97. He said it was an open secret in the vaudeville community, but there weren't that many of those people left alive to point it out.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, very funny guy. His music, I have a record by him called "I Wish I Was 18 Again," and that whole album is great. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I love that album.
Well, he
Great
was
stuff.
he was brought up in vaudeville. He was a consummate entertainer. He understood the value of an audience, and he had a great partner with Gracie Allen. They were, they killed. They were fabulous.
Yeah. So you wrote a lot of TV,
Yep.
and then the Big Fish movie comes into play.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Now I know that you kind of came in, actor first, or right? It was like 3 weeks before shooting. A rewrite was needed, I
That's
believe.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's when I started.
Yeah.
And I kept rewriting right through the shooting until all the dialogue was rewritten and there's nothing left for me to do. So I got to leave Martha's Vineyard, but Richard and Roy and Robert had to stay because they still had 2 months of shooting at sea to get all the shark stuff right. So while they were sweating out days trying to get a shark shot in the can,
Yeah.
I was back in LA, pursuing my career.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of people, like Steven himself, was like traumatized from just from shooting Jaws and being on the open water so long. And there was a funny story in the book. For the book, anybody out there, the Jaws log, fantastic book. Pick it up on Amazon. So we won't go too deep, but there's a lot of stuff in the book, so we won't go too deep into. But I know in there's a story of like Spielberg coming back and just the closer driving from Martha's Vineyard, the closer to Boston he got, like the more normal he felt because he was getting back into like, his type of atmosphere with more of a city type vibe. Yeah. Yeah. Martha's Vineyard that's local to us, which I appreciate the stories of, like Dreyfus in the bar and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I like that world in our little world type deal. You know what I mean? Quite, and Jaws is a masterpiece. I'm about to be 40 years old, and to this day, like I don't go into the ocean above the breast line. You know what I mean? If I'm swimming in a pool, if I'm in the deep end of a pool, and I'm underwater too long, I start thinking that I could get eaten by Jaws. That's
I know.
how.
I got to tell you that for the last 45 years, whenever I'm introduced to somebody as having any involvement with Jaws, the first thing people say is, after I saw that movie, I didn't go in the water, I didn't go in the lake, I didn't go in the bathtub, I didn't go in a swimming pool. People would say, that was this. I mean, I hear that to this day, 45, 46 years after the picture came out, that people are still afraid of the water. So obviously, we touched a nerve that is still being touched.
I
Yeah.
believe I believe they wanted to do like what Psycho did to with the shower scene. They were trying to captivate that with just the whole getting in the water experience, which
Yeah.
you guys did
Yep.
incredibly well.
Well, when I used to, you know, wonder that or worry that I was going to be a one-hit wonder, and then I realized that given how many people were affected by the movie, I just okay, relax, accept it, and then for the next 46 years, when people tell me that they don't, they get uncomfortable at the deep end of the pool,
Yeah.
I nod and smile, and I guess my principal achievement as an actor is pretending when I hear that line that I haven't heard it before
Yeah.
for 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great when you create you're part of creating something that has such an effect on people for so long.
Yeah, no, and to this day, in the AFI list of 100 top horror films of all time, Psycho is number one, and Jaws is number two. And I have in my possession a memo I wrote to Stephen, where I made two statements, one in error and one correctly. The erroneous statement I made, I read the script and I was reacting to the script. I was telling Stephen what I thought, and I said, why does the girl who has sex get killed right away? It's such a horror movie cliche. Teenager has sex, dies. I mean that's like the penalty for having sexual appetite is death. Why do we have to do that? And it turns out because Spielberg made it one of the most chilling opening sequences in the history of movies. So that was my incorrect statement. On the plus side, I did say in 1974, if we do our jobs, I'm talking about the screenwriter and the director, if we do our jobs, people will feel about going in the ocean the way they felt about taking a shower after Psycho.
Yeah. And it is,
Yeah, and the only reason I think Psycho beats you guys out is the fact that anyone can just go into a shower. You
Yeah.
have to actually travel to an ocean or a pool or a lake.
Yeah.
That's the only reason, and I'm standing by this. The only reason Psycho beats you. That's the only reason.
That's a good insight. I'll hang on to that. Thank you.
I think it's more of a respect towards Mr. Hitchcock is why Psycho is still number one.
That too. There was there are two great directors.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think within time, I think Jaws will eventually take that spot. You know what I mean? Because like I've never heard anybody talk about being afraid of taking a shower. You know what I mean? But going in the water is like 98% of the people I meet.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's the legacy of the fish movie.
The fish movie. That we worked on. You wrote for the first three. Best
Yes,
three.
I've never seen 4.
It's okay.
I
Michael
just-
Caine's in it. He does good.
I understand I'm not missing anything.
No.
No. A shark finally becomes a murderous psychopath and stalks down his prey. Yeah, that was a little far fetched, but well, what you gonna do, right?
Wasn't National Lampoon's supposed to produce, like, do the Jaws versus People one or something like that.
Yeah, they were developing a comedy version, and I think well, Spielberg was dead set against it, and Scheinberg, they said, you know what, we're not going to mock the biggest moneymaker that the studio ever had. That's fuck that. That's eating your young. That's cannibalizing your art. So we're not going to do that. And I respect that decision.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like it was taking on a slasher movie mentality a little bit, where it just went straight. It was gonna go all comedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Jaws is definitely, I consider, like a slasher movie. You have like a fiendish ghoul bad guy that goes out killing. You know what I mean? A body count. It's just a fish. It's not a person.
Yep. Well, by the way, I changed the background. This is Sydney Harbor, where a guy was just killed in a shark attack.
Oh, geez.
I seen that video. That was horrifying.
Yeah.
Something could be said about society for that too. As look at that dude just got eaten by a shark while he's holding his phone up. It's like don't help the guy or nothing.
Yeah.
I guess there's not much help you can give him.
Well, the truth is now is if Martians arrive, nobody's going to be awestruck or frightened. They're just going to all be holding up their cell phones, taking pictures, and then approaching the Martians for selfies.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we are in society. That
if they ever do a statue that typifies the early decades of the 21st century, it's going to be a future in which the world, all people are going to be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a crazy world we live in. Actually, I think it was Mark Twain who said that when technology surpasses, I think, personal communication, the world will be full of idiots or something along those lines. I'm sure I totally messed up that quote, but
Whose quote was it?
Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens.
Oh yeah, I know Mark Twain.
Yeah, he made, like I said, I probably just butchered the quote, but he made a observation that if technology got to a point which would make personal communications, talking one-on-one, obsolete, will be a world full of idiots, something along those lines, which I think is extremely true, especially nowadays, because I mean, you have people literally falling to the deaths trying to get a selfie. I mean, it's crazy.
It's scary. If the aliens do come, hopefully they'll make contact with somebody important and not like a Kardashian because they're the most famous person in the world.
Yeah.
That could be a problem too. Then that'll be a big ass on the statue holding the cell phone up.
Yeah.
Be troublesome. That's kind of where the future's going, probably. Everybody with big gigantic asses and cell phones that are just built into their hand. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, as long as they're not a jerk, right?
Well, yeah, so now you knew Steve Martin from a little ways back as well, right?
No, he was a writer on the Smothers Show, and he was a comedian at a time when I was a comedian.
Yeah,
each other from the theater.
I like that. So,
and then we all went to work on the Smothers Show and got our Writers Guild cards.
Now, the time that the jerk came around, did your affiliation with him find you that gig, or did it
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Steve had a fan named David Picker, who was at that time head of Paramount Pictures, and David saw the potential in Steve and signed him to a 3-picture deal. And Steve a 3-picture deal and a short subject that Paramount was going to attach to one of their big summer movies so that the audience would get used to seeing Steve on the big screen. It would be a way to transition from nightclubs and theaters to film. So Paramount funded a pretty lavish short subject called The Absent-Minded Waiter, which I directed partially in anticipation of directing the feature. But then Steve came to me around that same period uh, and said, I've got this deal to write movies, and I've never written a movie, and you've done, the biggest movie of all time, and you did at that time I had done a Richard Pryor film, so comedy, obviously.
Yeah.
So do you want to collaborate? I said, absolutely. I love collaborating with Steve, and because we had great success, we wrote a pilot that went straight from script to being shot. The pilot of George Burns.
Mm.
Uh, uh, that was a script that went from my typewriter through the tower at Universal with no notes, and it got a green light to be made as a pilot,
Wow.
and we did. Anyway, so there's obviously a lot of luck involved in
Yeah.
any career. But anyway, but my association with Steve was we had done stuff together. Then of course Barry Diller and Mike Eisner came over to run Paramount in a triumvirate with Picker, and the first thing they did was shit can all his projects because they didn't want the stockholders realizing that the guy they were replacing was responsible for some big movies.
Yeah.
So they scrapped plans to make what was then called Easy Money. So Steve and his management and David Picker set it up at Universal, where it became a huge hit. Ha ha, Paramount. And we had worked very hard at Paramount to write that script, but I had dropped out before the final rewrite because I had other stuff to do. And Michael Elias did the final rewrite and then shares the screenplay credit with the screenplay credit on The Jerk is story by Steve Martin and Carl Gottlieb, screenplay by Steve Martin, Carl Gottlieb, and Michael Elias. And Michael Elias is a huge contributor to that movie.
Mm. Now that Easy Money film had nothing to do with the Easy Money Rodney Dangerfield picture, did it?
No, it's just, it's an obvious title.
Just the title? No. You ever meet Rodney?
Yeah.
Rodney's
I don't know him personally. He seems a little driven.
Yeah. So, The Jerk, the great Carl Reiner, directed that. The Jerk's one of those, that's on every comedy list as well. That's a masterpiece.
No, listen, if I was a Jeopardy category, this is a joke I make all the time. If I was a Jeopardy category, it would be his hits begin with a J. Who is Carl Gottlieb?
You can't leave out Dr. Detroit, the double D. Come on. Masterpiece. Yeah, The Jerk's classic, you know what I mean? There's so many great gags in that. I love that blowjob line. She's gonna give me a blowjob. That as a kid, dude, I remember just dying with that. The classic. Now, I've heard people refer to that kind of Blazing Saddles like, you know what I mean? Where, of course, when it was made with good intention. The thing I'll say about, we live in a real PC world right now, but like when there was kind of racial humor back in the day, it was made so everybody could kind of laugh together. You know what I mean? And I don't think people understand that.
It wasn't culturally sensitive, but then in those days it wasn't important to be culturally sensitive.
Yeah.
As they say in Latin, ultra temp, ultra mores, other times, other customs.
It's true. You know what I mean? But The Jerk's great, masterpiece. I know the Hawkman over here is a big fan of The Jerk.
Oh yeah. Someone hates these cans. They're trying to shoot these cans.
Classic.
But yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge Steve Martin fan, and I have to say that The Jerk is definitely in the top 3 Steve Martin movies that I just love. Whenever it's on, I gotta watch it because it's just so much fun and so funny.
Yeah.
It's true, you know what I mean? Top 10. What'd you say?
Well, I mean, it's
top 3.
It's top 3. Okay, it's the top 3.
I think it's his best movie. I think it's Steve Martin's best vehicle. And Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, of course. Those two are the best.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, next up, I want to talk about Caveman a little bit. Written and directed by, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember watching. I seen this movie on television as a kid. It played on TV a lot, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Um, Super tribute to Ray Harryhausen. Was it intended to be that from the get go, or did that just kind of come into
Well,
play?
when we decided we were going to have dinosaurs, obviously, we looked around for a collaborator, and we found Jim Danforth, who was, famous and brilliantly talented, but he was kind of prickly. He really wanted to do things his way, and he was kind of short-tempered. And we had to replace him with one of his co-workers, a guy named David Allen, who did a fabulous job. And it's kind of a first for creature movies to have a funny dinosaur.
Yeah,
I think it's still the only one. I don't think there's any comedy dinosaurs.
yeah. I
Or
don't think so.
there's no comedy Harryhausen.
It's true.
Nope.
That is true. You know what I mean? It's I love the like it's very it has a campy vibe, of course. It's like I seen it at the perfect age. I think that I really liked it as a kid. You know what I mean? And the dinosaur, there's you can't match, the stop motion. It
Yeah.
just CGI can't compete with it. It's just because it's real. It's there. You know what I mean? It just has the slow back and forth. I like the part with the mosquito like face hugger when he smashes it on his face as a kid. You know what I mean? That was good times.
Biggest laugh in the movie.
Yeah, classic. Now we're coming from with Jaws. I know Jaws had a lot of with the shark not working. Did you have any like reservations going into like a big effects movie like Caveman?
No, I mean, once we decided to make the movie, we knew it was going to be an effects movie, so
Yeah,
we planned accordingly. We shot in Mexico because it was cheap. Uh, uh, we did stop motion because it was manageable, and we lucked out. We had a great time,
yeah,
and it was a great cast. I remember that cast included Shelley Long and John Matusak and Avery Schreiber, Jack Gilford,
yeah.
Shelley
Dennis
Long
Quaid.
before Cheers. It was her first
Yes, Dennis
big break.
Quaid, I believe. Yeah,
Uh,
Dennis Quaid was in there as well.
Yeah, and Dennis Quaid. And Ringo Starr, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, how was work with Ringo?
One of Ringo's better movies.
It is for sure. Ringo's a very lovable guy. You know
Yep,
what I mean?
yep,
He's kind of like a cartoon character in himself. I get the
yep.
feel. You know what I mean? How was it? Was it difficult working with like I know he did some of the Beatles movies and stuff, but was it any like disconnect with the fact that it was like a musician coming in to act?
Well, it's funny. I had worked for Richard Lester in a movie called Petulia. So when I learned I was going to be working with when we got Ringo, I called Richard Lester in London and I said, "Listen, I'm going to be working with Ringo. Can you? I know you used him very successfully in A Hard Day's Night, which is like the definitive rock and roll movie.
Mm,
I mean, it's never been equaled as a movie about a band. And believe me, I know I used to get after Jaws and uh, The Jerk and Caveman. I used to get a lot of offers to direct rock and roll movies, and I always would say, look, it's been done. It's been done as well as it can be done. There's no point in trying to duplicate Hard Day's Night. I mean, you're unfortunately, if you're a band and you want to make a movie, you've got to face the fact that the first movie in the genre defined it for all time, and you're stuck with comparisons.
mm.
I mean, it would be easier if the first movie in the genre of musicians acting was something like I don't know, something from the 40s or the 50s, White Christmas or Bing Crosby film or a Frank Sinatra film,
Yeah,
Guys and Dolls, but uh, Hard Day's Night is a perfect film for its type,
yeah.
and you know you're doomed if you try to duplicate its success.
truth. Yeah, no, it's definitely true. The Ringo was cool to work with and all that.
Ringo was great. He was a very conscientious actor. Richard Lester gave me some great advice. He said whenever I had Ringo in a scene, I always shot it with at least 2 cameras because I could not rely on Ringo to match, to repeat.
Yeah.
He's not a film actor, so he doesn't do that instinctively. And luckily for me, Dennis Quaid has a preternatural talent for matching. He, Dennis Quaid is a perfect film actor. I
Yeah.
mean, we filmed scenes 2 months apart. Uh, the mosquito scene, for example, and Dennis duplicated all his actions from the first take, which was months earlier. When we returned to the scene, he had all his moves down. Ringo, I had to have sit there with the editor and make sure that he matched.
Yeah. Did Ringo go to the school of Altman when it came to smoking joints?
No, Ringo was very good about not abusing on the set.
That's good. Yeah, he seemed, because they got all that Beatles, all the drug history with the Beatles. You don't know. Weed's very calm. He's not doing LSD on the set. Which we had a guest on once who told us a story about Anthony Perkins, was it, on the set of one of the Psycho movies, taking LSD out of his mind, which was fun. Getting truly psycho. Now there's this film called Dr. Detroit that I love to death. I think it's one of the greatest.
Another doctor job I enjoyed doing.
Yeah. How did Dr. Detroit come about?
I don't know. They had already started filming, like many of my pictures. Because I had a reputation, obviously, for being able to come in and save a movie.
You're the fixer. They call you the fixer.
The doctor is in.
Yes.
So they were in trouble, and they called me, and I went to Chicago to location and rewrote as we were filming, and it turned out terrific. I was very happy with the result. Once again, I was a matchmaker, just the way that Barbara Bach married Ringo Starr after meeting him on my movie. Donna Dixon married Dan Aykroyd as a result of meeting on my movie, or a movie that I was involved in.
Yeah.
So the Gottlieb matchmaker talent never failed.
I like that. How nerve-wracking is it to be writing a film while it's shooting, like on the set?
It's if you're a professional, and I like to think of myself as a professional,
Yeah.
you deal with what is. You deal with the problems. You deal with the egos involved. You're half the time you're being a diplomat. You're mediating between factions. The producers want to keep it cheap. The director wants to make it his movie. The actors want more lines. And you're as a writer on the set or on location, you're balancing all these competing interests, trying to satisfy everybody. But as a writer, as Carl Gottlieb, I have to be first and foremost focused on making it a good movie. The job comes first, the project. And if everybody understood that, movies would be a lot better because nobody would indulge their egos.
Yeah. So they got you tucked away in like a trailer somewhere writing, or how does that go?
It goes out, you wind up living in a hotel room with a typewriter.
Yeah.
As a companion. If you're lucky, and I always insisted on 2 rooms in my deal because I don't like to write in the same room that I sleep in.
Makes sense.
So I tell the production manager, whoever, to book me an adjacent room with the typewriter in an office, set up. Take out the beds, put in a desk and a chair.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
It's all a real writer needs.
Yep.
I think that the movie didn't really go over box office wise. You know, anybody out there who's never seen this movie, we've talked about it on the show before. You need to go see it. I love it. One of my favorite comedies of the time. You know, but box office, it was, I think, the first film that Dan Aykroyd did without Belushi, because he passed like 6 months or something prior to them shooting it. So I always heard that was kind of like part of the issue with box office. It's a great movie. The movie's great.
Yeah, I mean, but people saw Aykroyd and they were kind of looking around, for, where's Belushi?
Yeah.
Sadly, nowhere to be found.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's quite a team. I mean, they'd probably, to this day, they'd probably still be doing films together. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's crazy how those teams break up. You know what I mean? Like Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, they were a big team for a while, even though I heard they weren't really friendly towards the end. You know what I mean? But they were a great team. You know what I mean?
They were primarily solo artists.
Yeah.
And Belushi and Aykroyd, they actually made a film together called Neighbors?
Neighbors, yeah. John G. Avildsen directed it.
And that was bizarre because Aykroyd played the part that you would think Belushi would have played, and Belushi played the part that Aykroyd should have played.
Yeah.
So the movie was, fatally flawed from its inception, because the actors who had a lot of clout, everybody was saying, okay, if John and Danny want to do this, let's do it for them.
Yeah.
But they were mistaken. The chemistry wasn't there.
Yeah. It's a weird flip. I think Aykroyd's the best when he's playing almost the wild one. You know what I mean? And even when he's,
that's because Danny has the appearance of sanity, but he's crazy.
Yeah.
He has the appearance of crazy, but he's sane.
Yeah.
So it's an odd dichotomy, but it works for the chemistry of the team as long as they stick to those parameters. But when Belushi is going to become the oddball, and Danny's going to be, or Belushi's going to be the straight arrow, and Danny's going to be the oddball, they're not comfortable in those parts. So
yeah,
the movie suffered.
Yeah, and it's a fun movie. I own it. You know what I mean? Now, Dr. Detroit was originally a novella, right? Like a short story or something like that.
I remember when we came down to the arbitration for screen credit, that was the first time I read the source material, which was a short story by Bruce J. Friedman. And when I read the short story, I said, holy shit, I wish you had given me this to work on for the rewrite. I could have made it even a much better movie if I was starting with the original concept. But by the time it came to me, it had been through Robert Boris's pen and Michael Pressman's direction.
Yeah.
Neither of them were comedy geniuses, and their later careers, they went back to what they did best. Michael did Picket Fences and a lot of serious stuff, and Michael Pressman, and it showed. When there's an old saying, "Shoemaker, stick to your last." There's something to be said for typecasting.
Yeah.
Both in directing and writing and acting.
Yeah. So was the original story more serious, or was that comedic as well?
No, it was very comedic, but it was
okay.
Just much more artfully told. See, Michael had this tragic flaw as a comedy director. Michael, I can't blame him, but for the faculty members and everything, he cast actors who were all 30 years older than himself, which makes sense if you're 20.
Yeah.
Then the faculty would be in their 50s and 60s. But Michael was in his late 40s, early 50s, and he was casting actors who were 70 and 80 years old, who were kind of past their prime to play the faculty. And it was a mistake, but it was a mistake we were stuck with. And he didn't have a flair for visual comedy. One of the things I pride myself as a writer is I can write physical gags. I can write visual humor.
Yeah.
or visual tension for that matter. And I wrote a great visual gag, and I checked with the prop department, with the Teamsters to see if it was possible. And everybody said, yeah, we can do that. It's a special effects gag. And I put it in a script, and I explained it to Michael, and I drew little sketches. And he said, I don't think it's funny. We're not going to shoot it.
Mm.
And it just drove me nuts because it was funny. And if he had shot it, it would have been a big joke. I'll tell you what it was. There's a chase in a junkyard, and Aykroyd is driving a forklift, and he's trying to catch the limo with mom in it, and he rams it with the forklift, and basically says, you know, aha, I have you now, and he presses the levers to lift the limo into the air because the limo is so much heavier than the forklift, when he presses the lift lever, the limo stays on the ground, and the forklift goes up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's a funny joke.
Yeah.
Michael never got it, so he never shot it.
I also in an interview I heard him talk about how if he could go back and take out a lot of the drug stuff, which I thought was interesting because that's some really fun gags, all that drug stuff. You know what I mean? Now, the way that he looked, Dr. Detroit looked, was that in the book, or was that kind of a creation from you guys?
No, that was Danny's conceit.
That was Danny?
Yeah, and I don't know why he had to do all that weirdness, but
I love the hand.
you know, he was the hero at that time, so everybody did whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
So it was another example of be careful what you wish for. I want Dan Aykroyd. Good, you got him. Dan Aykroyd says, I want to do this. I want to wear this wacky costume. And the director goes, okay, tell the wardrobe department, and they do it. But I don't know how it advanced the plot or made the movie better. It made it more interesting, maybe visually, but
Yeah, it's more colorful. I wonder what he would if he didn't like call the shot on that. I wonder how he would have actually looked.
we'll never know.
We'll never know.
Beauty of, until they remake Dr. Detroit.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that. You know, at the end, they have that promo, which I heard was your idea. I heard to put the part, you know, the Wrath of Mom coming soon.
Yeah, because at that point, the Star Wars sequel was the biggest news in movies, you know, The Wrath of Khan.
Was there talks if the movie was successful, was there talks of doing a sequel, or is that strictly just kind of like, you know,
I don't think the way that everybody's career was going, the studio was not going to give another comedy to Michael Pressman. Dan Aykroyd was on to other things.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was never real.
Yeah.
But it would have been fun.
I would love to. I heard that there was a script that was actually written for it.
I've never seen it.
Me either, and I would love to change that. I would love to read it. That would be great. We just lost Howard Hessman. Any cool stories of him from Smooth Walker? A great character. I love him in Dr. Detroit.
No, I was very happy to be working with an old pal from the committee in that movie. So it was, you know, made it easy to write for him and do jokes with him and everything, because we had a rapport, we had a shorthand that we developed over the days of the committee. And he's a great improviser himself. I think he improvised a great line. He's arguing with T.K. Carter, the black driver.
Yeah.
And he says, at one point, Carter's talking about his grandparents who were slaves. And Hessman says, "Oh yeah, well my grandfather owned your grandfather."
Yeah. That's a tough line.
Good line. Tough.
Yeah. We usually end the show with one question, and
Sure.
it is: we have a lot of artists, you know, filmmakers, writers, comedians, authors that listen to the show and watch the show. Do you have any advice for anybody that might have come into a snag or a holdup and, you know, discouraging moment in their career, so to speak, that you might have some advice for them?
Yes, I have advice for all writers. And that is, you got to keep writing. If you hit a writer's block, if you hit a snag, you got to go back to the keyboard. And even if you're just typing lists or, you know, organizing your schedule, you got to keep writing. You write your way through the block. You write other stuff. You write grocery lists. You write jokes. You write letters to friends. But keep on hitting the keyboard, and eventually you get back to your purpose for being there, your raison d'etre. You got a script to finish, you got a project, and if you devote yourself to the project and keep writing, you'll finish it, and you'll finish it to your credit. And to me, a professional is somebody who, under the worst of circumstances, stupid producers, thoughtless actors, you know, callous production managers, they go through all the negatives that you can find. As long as you keep your mind on writing the story on the script, making one line of dialogue follow the next, keep the dialogue plausible, keep the exposition understandable, just do the job of the screenwriter, and you can't be faulted for that, and the product will reflect quality because you've never strayed from the objective. And as a writer, your job is to finish writing. And a professional is somebody who, and whether it's a professional carpenter or a professional air conditioning repairman or a professional comedian or a professional deep sea diver, is a professional can be counted on, no matter what the circumstances, to deliver a acceptable product. You know, if I'm a professional writer, what I write is always going to be filmable. It might not be genius, it might not be high art, but sometimes movies and television shows aren't intended to be high art. They're just intended to be what they are, a series episode or a lightweight film. But if you're conscientious about writing it, A, it'll come out well, and B, you can't be faulted. So be a professional. Write. If you're a professional writer, keep writing, no matter what.
Hell yeah, I like that. Well, Carl, we're gigantic fans of your work, man, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the show.
Happy
Yes.
to be here. Thanks for asking me, and good luck and God bless, as they say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good one.
I'm
Bye-bye.
leaving. Bye.
Bye. Cool beans. All right, folks, that was a fantastic episode of the BoomBastiCAST with Carl Gottlieb, a fucking hero. This dude's the man. For anybody that listens to the show knows how much I fucking love Dr. Detroit, and he's made movies that are arguably better than Dr. Detroit. Don't tell nobody. But some other, The Jerk and Jaws are films that, woo, dude, those movies, Jaws, one of the biggest films of all time, period, end of sentence. He breaks through genres, you know what I mean? The Jerk, one of the greatest comedies ever made, you know what I mean? For sure, to this day, until when there is no more such thing as days, it'd still be a great film. Caveman, I loved it, dude, from my childhood. It's one of the first movies I really remember seeing, you know what I mean? Hawkman, what'd you think?
Hey, I had so much fun. It's good. I mean, don't get me wrong. As I always say, I love talking about, the stories, all the experiences. But what I also love is the conversations. Like, for example, talking about how back in his time, not saying that there weren't people, trying to always, get the gig and all that, but there was more of a sense of community. There was more a sense of, oh, I didn't get this gig, but hey, maybe you will. So, check it out. And it's one of the problems that both Matt and I have found, and we've fought against, unfortunately, is that a lot of people in this industry, I mean, it is competitive, but a lot of people lose the sight of that. If you want to be successful, and I truly believe this, if you want to be successful, the best way to try to be successful is helping each other out.
For sure.
And because the fact is, yes, the cards are stacked against you. It's not an easy profession. It's not easy to get in. But if I help Matt get something, and then he goes up and becomes successful, then he can help me, and it's the back and forth.
Right.
Because the chances of being more successful is the chances of working with people willing to help each other out. and that's one
Sure.
of the things that, unfortunately, I think that is missing a lot in society.
I think when we had Larry on the show, Larry Hank, I think we talked a little bit about that too, just kind of
Yeah.
the camaraderie of the committee, you know what I mean, in groups like that. And a lot of those, Second City and stuff like that, where you see a lot of the comedians of that day that blew up in film, they're all kind of part of these groups, and it's a supportive group where they support each other. And it's really unfortunate that you don't really catch that. I'm sure in some circles you might catch that, but not as many as back in the day, unfortunately, but a great interview. Again, we want to plug the book,
Oh yeah.
The Jaws Log. All right.
Yep.
This book, look at that, double time.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. It was written while the film was being made. It came out, I think, a month after the movie came out. You know what I mean? Or at least it was being stored in his brain while the movie was being made, and then he threw it on paper, like that. And I own multiple Jaws books and
Yeah.
documentaries.
Also, it has cool pictures inside the books right here.
It does have cool pics in it. Like I said, it's the best Jaws book I've ever read. If you're a fan of making films or Jaws or just films in general, I say pick it up. It's on Amazon for $15. It's no big deal. It's a fucking meal at McDonald's, dude. You know what I mean? Except this will fill your soul
Just
every
a
time you
meal
read it.
for your brain. A meal for
That's-
your brain.
Meal for your brain. Sink your jaws into the Jaws log. You know what I mean? But for sure, we're not just whistling Dixie. The book was great. Check it out and let us know what you think of it. Do you want to say anything in closing?
Nothing, just that it was a great interview. We were so happy to have him on talking about, not only his experiences as a writer, as a director, as an actor. This guy has done a lot. He's worked with some of the greatest people out there,
Right.
and extremely talented guy. Extremely has great insight, and definitely like what he was saying about. I mean, I'm trying to get back into writing. I kind of fell out of it for a while, and I'm trying to get back in. And his advice of just keep on writing, which is something I have to take to heart and go back into, because that's the only way you do it.
I'm with that, yo. So, with that being said, go grab his book, go watch one of his masterpiece films, and celebrate Carl Gottlieb today. Why not? And we'll catch all y'all on the next episode of the BoomBastiCAST. All right? Big peace. Nothing but love for you, baby. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.